Hello, soul searchers. Welcome back. Today is day 10 of 12 days of breakthroughs, and we are talking all about negative emotions, why negative emotions aren't a real thing. They're just emotions. There's no such thing as positive, negative, good, bad emotions. We're going to talk all about spiritual bypassing, what it is, how to know if you're doing it, and why it's shitty. We're not going to go super deep into how to actually process your emotions. I have an entire podcast episode on that. It's called Feel Your Feelings. And I might do a separate video to go deeper into it if you guys want. But we will touch upon what it looks like to actually process your emotions a bit in this. So like we've been doing in this series, we're going to be breaking down what the traditional conditioning that we've been all brought up to believe is about emotions, what emotions are okay to feel, which ones are not okay to feel, and then also I'm going to offer you a new paradigm of thinking, a new paradigm of operating in that's probably going to be more helpful for you. Especially if you're somebody who feels like you're kind of out of control with your emotions, if you feel like you're completely out of touch with your emotions, or if you've been told that you need to actually feel your feelings but have no idea what that means. So let's start with defining what is spiritual bypassing, and another term for this is like emotional bypassing. They're slightly different but pretty much hit at the same point of not wanting to process your emotions, not wanting to feel bad or negative emotions, or sugarcoating your emotions, toxic positivity, stuff like this to make you invalidate how you actually feel. And in spiritual bypassing, there's this added element that can use spiritual beliefs or spiritual concepts to justify emotional bypassing. So some examples of spiritual bypassing might be this idea that God has a plan, or that everything happens for a reason, and that supposedly should negate the way that you feel about trauma and your past. Or people will have the audacity to say that you should feel grateful for your trauma because it's helped you grow, it's turned you into who you are. While the positive intention behind these messages may be to help you build some resiliency in yourself, be able to accept the past and still be able to live your life, the way that it comes across and the way that it becomes unhelpful is that it bypasses the actual human being's experience with this fallacy that we should feel good all the time, or that if it's possible to feel better, then you should do it. Both emotional bypassing and spiritual bypassing are ways that also gaslight yourself out of the truth and intelligence of what you're going through and what your current reality is, with the intention to not process your emotions and even maintain like a good front. Like everything's okay. When in fact, obviously things are not okay. I think some people just think that, oh, if you don't think about it, then it'll just go away. Or they think it's bad to feel bad. And the paradigms that we've all kind of lived in, which is now thankfully shifting with more knowledge about mental health, social media, people talking about their experiences with mental health, understanding that there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all approach to mental health or spirituality. But you look at the different paradigms of how we've treated emotions in the past, and kind of like the boomer era was, you can't feel bad. You shouldn't feel bad. People have it worse than you. What do you have to complain about? Like, we're not in a war. Things are fine. And you shouldn't have any negative emotion. It's kind of like, oh, you're soft and you can't handle the real world and you're not tough enough if you have emotions and express those emotions. When in reality, they're just a generation that was taught to spiritually bypass, and that was the only way to survive. So then you have this culture that it's okay to feel bad, but you should fix it. Like, there's a solution to everything. You should just go to therapy. You should just fix it. Oh, you feel bad and that's fine, but here's this positive thought instead. Like this idea that happiness is a choice and you should always choose to feel happy, or you should always be striving to feel happy and negate any negative emotion that you might feel. Because again, we're living in this paradigm that there's such a thing as good emotion, bad emotion. Now we're starting to open up this conversation of it's okay to not be okay, and that's just it. We're starting to realize that we can allow ourselves to be human, and we can still be successful, we can still be productive, we can still do what we need to do, but it's actually time to start to slow down and let ourselves be human, to not have to be perfect, to meet our emotions with non-judgment, with acceptance, instead of criticism and shame, and without having to feel this desperation to get out of it, or is somehow harming you to stay in these uncomfortable emotions. The truth is that emotions are intelligent, and this new paradigm that I want to offer you is that emotions are holistic. They're part of the human experience. Spiritual bypassing has made it seem like these low vibes are completely unacceptable and it's actually going to pull you down in life, make you stuck there, and that you need to keep treading water to stay afloat. But in reality, we need this contrast to exist. That's the only way that we actually can perceive, quote, positive emotions is if we're going through the uncomfortable, shitty, painful, negative ones. There's actually a lot of intelligence in those, quote, negative emotions like anger and sadness and grief. We actually need the contrast to exist to live a full life. And because nature is cyclical, change is the only constant, these emotions that we go through are going to be temporary, whether that is a day, an hour, or a month, a year. And if you can allow yourself to be in the discomfort, the confusion, the pain of the emotion and process it, noticing how it feels in your body, noticing the things that it makes you want to do or not do, create awareness about who you are when you're in those emotions and what your needs are, you're going to be able to hold space to feel all the feelings. You're going to still be able to move through your life, and you won't have to waste your energy fighting yourself. This is the tolerance of the human experience that we all need to have some skill level in. I mean, just think about it. You can feel great in your business or your career, but you can also feel lost in the same time. You could also be questioning whether or not this is what you really want to do in your life, or you could be going through some challenges and tension at home. You could feel confident in yourself and who you are, but then when you meet somebody new, you feel shy and you go back into your shell. Or you get triggered by someone and you start to feel small, or you feel angry and envious. There's intelligence in all of that. There is a real reason for all of that. There's hormones that are at play that make you feel certain feelings. For example, if you feel great and successful in your career because you've made a bunch of money, you're able to live a lifestyle that you've always wanted to live that maybe you haven't been able to before, but you still feel empty or purposeless, the pathway to go with that is not to spiritually bypass, ignore the part where you feel bad and ignore the part where you feel purposeless and just convince yourself that what you're doing is meaningful. That's an option, but there's actually probably something there because it's coming from within. Maybe there's an opportunity there to actually get more intimate with yourself, with who you are, what you want your future to look like. Maybe the truth is that there's a part of you that feels like you're wasting your life and you've always wanted to do something else. But without giving that, quote, negative emotion the airspace to come through and be observed, you're closing yourself off to all of that internal wisdom. On the flip side, if you do actually really love your career and you feel like maybe, is this really purposeful for you, but that's coming from the outside world, thinking you have to be like changing the world in order for it to be purposeful and meaningful to you, then that's something where you can explore to release that shame or release that criticism so that you can allow yourself to just enjoy being in your career. If you feel confident in who you are, but you feel triggered by somebody else who's skinnier than you, prettier than you, richer than you, looks more in love than you, then maybe there the intelligence is that you don't feel good enough. And again, there's deeper intimacy work to do with yourself. Or it could also be that somebody else has very different values from you, and it's a validation that you are just a different person, that you just have different values, different things that are important to you, and it makes you more of who you are. There's also such a thing as righteous anger. Things like racism and oppression exists. The class division and wealth gap is so large right now. Things that just don't make sense in the world, like why we still have mass shootings and people are arguing over abortion when we don't even have things like childcare that is required in every single state. There's just so many factors that go into why we feel the way we feel that it warrants our care and attention to ourselves so that we can be productive in our own lives, whatever that looks like to us, so that we can live the life that we really want to live. Emotions are a huge part of that. In fact, that is the driving force behind a lot of the decisions that we make. So now that presents the question, what do you do when you feel like your emotions are getting in the way? Well, a few different notes on this. First is to recognize that you don't have to fight it. That's one option. It can feel like you're carrying around a heavy bag with you, especially if this bag is like grief, past trauma, anger, sadness. But that doesn't mean you can't experience the good in life while you're holding onto this bag. And it also doesn't mean you have to get rid of it, try to work your way to things like forgiveness or acceptance or just not giving a fuck. You don't have to be this picture of perfect zen and calm. So you get to just kind of carry this heavy bag with you, this emotions that you can put down for a little while. If it gets too heavy, pick it back up and carry it some more. One day you might find that you actually do want to just let it down and let it go. One day you might find that you want to empty the bag. Or one day you might discover that you've developed the strength and the stamina to hold on to the bag and still live your life. There's no right or wrong way to deal with the human experience. What's important is just having the awareness, compassion, and acceptance for yourself to know where you're at and navigate the path from there. If you notice that your emotions are like, quote, getting in the way, stopping you from living the life that you want to live, stopping you from feeling the things that you want to feel, enjoying the time that you have, it's stopping you from being in the present. The obvious thing is also that you can get professional help to actually process your emotions because they're trained in doing so. Things like cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectic behavior therapy, coaching, even things like trance and hypnosis, meditation, talking to a mindfulness practitioner. But also individually, what you can do is start by labeling your emotions, understanding the nuance of different emotions. I highly recommend looking up the emotions wheel, or I'll put it right here. And you'll see that the main emotions that we can label, like mad, sad, glad, actually break down to even more emotions. Not just anxiety, but also there's overwhelm. There's also confusion. There's also stress and tension. Even things like sad and depressed. There's different nuances to those emotions. I highly also recommend looking into Brené Brown. She has a book called Atlas of the Heart, as well as an HBO Max series called Atlas of the Heart, which is literally an atlas of the heart, where she talks about different emotions that we experience, different places that we go, and the emotions that we experience within our own selves based off of what we're thinking or what we're going through in our lives. And it's just great to build your emotional vocabulary so that you can be accurate with what you feel. Oftentimes, once we've accurately labeled how we feel, that's the first step in naturally being able to know how to navigate it. Like if you feel anger towards somebody, but that anger is actually resentment, if you can only look at it from that top surface level of anger, you might think that you just need to get over it, or you need to have more compassion for them, or they need to right some wrong. But if you actually can label it as resentment, then there's more information there to know how you can actually navigate the situation in a way that attends to that specific emotion. Whether that's actually communicating what it is that you're resentful over, where you feel like there's an unequal balance of power, or where you need to distance yourself and create boundaries for your own mental health and wellness. While you're processing your emotions, you also want to notice what tendencies you have within these. These are your mental tendencies as well as your behavioral tendencies. If you start spinning out and thinking about how everything's going to go wrong, how you've never done enough in your life, you've always failed, there's no way that you can succeed, whatever it is, notice where your brain likes to spin, and also notice what you like to do in those times, whether that's Netflix binging for 10 hours, going out and partying and getting drunk. All of these have reasons, whether that's overwhelm, making you wanting to just zone out and not feel anything, or you feel unseen, unheard, you feel dead in your life, and then you go out trying to make yourself feel more alive. One of the ways that I love processing emotions with my clients is that I'll actually put them through a meditation and we'll see physically where do they feel these emotions. For example, things like anxiety, you might manifest that in your chest. It feels really tight and constricted. Your head feels tense and you feel like you can't really breathe that much. You can't really move. Maybe your thoughts are running at 100 miles an hour. Maybe it feels really hot in your head, but it feels very heavy in your body. And I'll also have them actually have a conversation with that emotion. One of my favorite questions to ask is, does that emotion have a face or a voice associated with it? If you're dealing with things like anxiety, stress, inner critics, if you're doing any inner child healing or looking at any past traumas, you'll see that there's oftentimes a voice of criticism that is from your parents. Even just noticing that what you're currently thinking is a manifestation of how you were raised, of past trauma, of just different paradigms of thinking can be really helpful to know that this is actually not yours. This is not what you truly think. This is somebody else's whose voice has just decided to be very loud today. In this work, I can also help my clients have open communication with that emotion to see what is the intention of that emotion. Why is it here? What does it need to leave? Does it want it to leave? What can it be transformed into? And it's actually a beautiful process that I wish everybody could go through and that I could guide everyone through. If that does interest you, all the more reason to work with me one-on-one and actually get proper guidance in feeling your feelings, processing your emotions. Now, I will say there's no clear sign that you've finished processing an emotion. especially if you're dealing with something that is a long-term trauma, something that happened recently, or is just a kind of an acute situation. Those things can be easily processed and, moved on from. But things that are triggered from the past, those you might find is just less and less triggering for you, that you have more capacity to handle things when those emotions do get triggered. And for me, the way that I know that I've processed an emotion is that if I don't get further triggered by that same situation in the future or currently, then I know I've done the work. Additionally, if I've been able to meet myself with acceptance, understanding, and compassion, then I know I've done some work there. Versus if I'm still ruminating on the past, if it's still affecting me in my current decision making, or I still react in the same way in the present as I did in the past to the same scenario, which is typically something that feels kind of like out of my control, like I just feel really angry about something, then I know there's either more processing to do or more surrendering that I have to do to just allow it to be what it is. A big part of being able to process your emotions is to literally just trust your body and use your discernment to know that you have done some work, you've put some attention in there. Now it's time to do some work, get into your life, go have some fun, hang out with your friends, whatever it is. So realize here that if you feel like your emotions are, quote, getting in the way, and you still have goals that you want to achieve, things to do, that you're still in control of your decision-making process. You might need to compartmentalize for your day in order to get through what you need to get through in this reality in your life, but then also still make space to process emotions at a different time. It's not something that you have to spend 24/7 processing your emotions because somebody said something mean to you. The important piece is that you just don't gloss over it. I'll give you an example of how I actually go through and work on finding that balance between being able to do my work, be productive, work on my goals, and also still maintain my inner peace by processing my emotions and making space for however I feel and that flexibility that changes day to day. I'm going to go through the lens of honoring my body. That is like the most important thing for me. So I'm going to listen to what my body needs without the pressure to push through into discomfort. And honestly, in fact, sometimes the most uncomfortable thing, especially if you're an overachiever or a perfectionist or somebody who's addicted to work, is to let yourself rest. While your brain is telling you that you need to do work or that you're going to fall behind or whatever, is to shush that part of your brain and let yourself rest. I find that when I make the space to honor my body instead of fight it, it allows me to process whatever stresses come up in the day much better. It allows me to maintain grounded as I go through the discomfort of needing to show up for my work or my body. And it gives me the groundedness to feel like I don't have to be pressured right now. Things will take as long as they need to take, and stop worrying. When I'm in a neutral state, so I'm not like feeling like shit, I'm also not necessarily highly motivated to do anything. It's kind of just neutral. This is probably 50% of days. I'm going to look at my day through the lens of my priorities. What do I want to show up for? And allow myself to show up even though I might feel a little discomfort, or sometimes a lot of discomfort. Whether that's I need to get changed, put on makeup, I need to get my camera set up and start filming, I need to edit today, maybe I need to do laundry, go to the grocery store, but I don't feel up for it. In a neutral state, I know that my capacity is such that I can let myself be uncomfortable, and it might take up some energy, but I'll also be able to give myself space to replenish my energy somehow, whether that's going out on a walk, having some alone time, zoinking out on TikTok or watching Netflix. Whatever it is, it's finding that balance for yourself. And when I'm in an energized or very motivated state, I'm going to follow my passion. I'm going to follow my creativity. I don't necessarily force myself to be productive here because I don't need it. It's very easy for me to get into flow and do things, but I might want to guide my energy here to do the bigger picture thinking or do things like automations, planning out this like YouTube series, do creative work, do long copywriting. Within my life, it's also going to look like big picture goals, maybe even something like meal planning. Whatever it is, in those states, I feel fueled by myself and I let things be easy. If that resonates with you, highly recommend just taking note of how you feel on a day-to-day basis and what your decision-making process looks like so that you can balance that emotional processing need as well as being able to be productive. The last thing I want to touch upon when we're talking about decision making as well as how emotions are evolved is logic, because the society that we've been brought up in has very heavily conditioned us to believe that emotions are bad, women are more emotional, and that makes them worse leaders, when literally there's so many studies that show that that is not true, that women are actually better leaders because they're able to actually care for the people in their companies with more emotional capacity typically. they are not emotionally bypassing like many men are taught to do, you're able to not just look at a person as their productivity, but also as a general whole and look at their entire well-being. After all, emotional intelligence is an actual thing and very well studied. So here's this new paradigm that I want to offer you. Logic is still an emotional decision, and emotional decisions are still logical. Everything we want is because of a way that we think it's going to make us feel, whether we're avoiding an emotion like pain and grief, sadness, failure, shame, or we're trying to create an emotion and run towards it like happiness, joy, excitement, love. Let's say that you are an entrepreneur and you're trying to get some work done, or you're in a career where you're trying to get promoted. If you're in a place where you are very low energy or you don't have the capacity to do things, you're burnt out, logically, you might be telling yourself, oh, it's logical to overwork, to push through and do things anyways, because how much you do is what actually creates results. If you look at the emotional undercurrent of that, though, and the intention, you're trying to avoid the feeling of shame and discomfort and working towards feeling productive or content. So often we spend so much time trying to optimize for a certain outcome that if we looked at it from an emotional standpoint, you actually might get there quicker. For example, in the same scenario, if you think emotionally, you want to feel at peace and productive in your day, then you might decide that you want to take the morning slow, go for a walk, get yourself grounded, so that you have the energy to actually do work and be productive. Then your focus time can just be to finish this one or two really big things that are actually time sensitive and important. And in that case, you're starting with the emotions, then using logic from there to actually get the best of both worlds. Now, obviously, if you're feeling kind of crappy or down and it's a temporary thing, and you actually want to boost your mood so that you can get things done because you know that this isn't a big deal to you truly, then you can either start with emotion or logic for that scenario. Logically, you know that going out for a walk might make you feel better. Logically, you know that talking to a friend might make you feel better. Emotionally, you know that what you're feeling right now is temporary. And emotionally, you might have the intelligence to know what it is that you need and respond to it. So just notice here that emotions and logic are a symbiotic relationship and you can't just lead with one. If you're feeling like shit, you want to process your emotions without bypassing it, and you still need to get your work done, use your discernment to figure out what you have the capacity for, how you want to boost your mood or your energy, or take things off your plate. It's going to be highly individualized, which is why it's so important to do the work to understand yourself instead of just watching videos like this and listening to it, or reading Instagram posts and saving them, but to actually spend the time to integrate it, to build systems for yourself, write it down, build your own awareness, or work with a professional to help guide you through all of it. Remember this, personal development isn't about constantly seeking to better yourself, fix your bad habits, or chasing growth to bypass being human. It's about learning to embody 100% of who you are and celebrating the divinity that exists within your humanity. If that resonates with you and you are ready to do the work to embody your true self, you can go to jentsui.com, that's JENCUI.com, to work with me one-on-one. Honestly, if you feel like you've been doing the work but it's a slow burn for you, if you feel like you kind of hit a wall and you don't know how to move past it, then it might just be time to invest in yourself so that you can focus on what your priorities are. That's everything for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Now go out there and feel your feelings. I'll see you in the next one.